On a cold winter's night in 1817, a soldier patrolling the Tower of London reported seeing something that should not have existed. As he neared the Martin Tower, he noticed a shadow forming on the stones, darker than the night, shapeless at first, then rising, stretching into a monstrous figure. He froze, unable to move, as the shadow took on the outline of a great bear. The creature advanced, its glowing eyes fixed on him. In terror, the guard lunged forward with his bayonet, only to feel the weapon pass through thin air. The bear vanished, and moments later, the soldier collapsed. By the time his comrades found him, he was dead. What had he seen that night? A hallucination brought on by fear, or the restless echo of something tied to the tower's grim and bloody past? Reports of phantom animals, ghostly queens, headless nobles, and mysterious figures have haunted these walls for centuries. And yet, the Tower of London is not only a prison of stone. It is a prison of memory, a fortress where the dead linger, refusing to let their stories be forgotten. Before we uncover more, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more chilling history. The Tower of London rises on the north bank of the River Thames, its stark silhouette dominating the London skyline for nearly 1,000 years. Commissioned by William the Conqueror after his invasion of England in 1066, the fortress was built not only to guard the capital, but to impose Norman power upon a conquered people. Its central keep, the White Tower, loomed above the city like a warning, a symbol of domination, strength, and fear. But as centuries passed, the tower became more than a fortress. It was a palace, a treasury, a menagerie, and above all, a prison. Within its thick walls, kings plotted, traitors died, and legends were born. Each stone carries a memory of violence and ambition. Each chamber holds whispers of those who suffered there. The hauntings of the tower are not confined to one era. They span the ages, weaving together the fates of royalty and commoners alike. Perhaps the most famous is the ghost of Anne Boleyn, the ill-fated second wife of Henry VIII. In 1536, she was accused of adultery, witchcraft, and treason. History tells us her trial was a farce, her fate sealed before the verdict was spoken. She was led to Tower Green, within sight of the chapel where she once prayed. Kneeling, she spoke her final words, forgiving the king who betrayed her. Then, with a single stroke of a French executioner's sword, her life ended. Yet her presence never left. Visitors and guards alike have reported seeing Anne's ghost wandering the corridors of the tower, sometimes headless, sometimes carrying her severed head in her hands. Others claim to have seen her figure gliding silently through the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where her body lies. Witnesses describe a sorrowful energy in her gaze, a presence that chills the blood. For nearly 5 centuries, Anne Boleyn has refused to rest. But she is not alone. Many of Henry VIII's victims are said to linger here. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, was another noble executed at the tower. Her death was brutal, botched by the executioner, who struck again and again before she finally fell. It is said that her ghost reenacts her final moments, fleeing in terror across Tower Green before collapsing into nothingness. Guards have sworn they have seen her phantom form running silently through the night. The tower also holds the mystery of the princes in the tower, Edward V and his younger brother Richard, sons of Edward IV. After their father's death in 1483, the young boys were placed in the tower by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Within weeks they vanished. Many believe they were murdered on Richard's orders so he could seize the throne. Centuries later, bones were found beneath a staircase in the tower, believed to be theirs, but their spirits are said to wander still. Witnesses tell of 2 small figures dressed in nightshirts, holding hands, their faces pale and sad. They are seen huddling in corners or drifting silently through the bloody tower, their presence a reminder of innocence betrayed. The list of phantoms does not end there. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, executed at the Tower in 1554, is said to appear near the battlements, her sorrowful face illuminated by moonlight. Arbella Stewart, once a potential heir to the throne, imprisoned and starved to death in the Tower, has been sighted wandering in despair, And then there are the spectral animals, echoes of the tower's centuries as a royal menagerie. Lions, monkeys, even that great phantom bear. Strange beasts whose restless spirits seem to have clawed their way into the afterlife. Each sighting is part of a larger tapestry of terror. The tower is not just haunted by individuals, but by the weight of history itself. Tourists today report sudden chills, the feeling of invisible hands brushing against their skin, whispers in empty corridors. Guards on night duty speak of unseen footsteps following them, of doors creaking open without cause, of muffled cries echoing from locked rooms. Some refuse to walk alone after midnight, convinced that the tower itself comes alive when the city sleeps. As centuries pass, the tower remains a place where the living and the dead walk side by side. Its stones are soaked not only in blood but in memory, and those memories do not fade easily. But the tower's haunted history does not stop with Anne Boleyn or the lost princes. There are darker tales still, of torture chambers, traitors' executions, and the restless cries of those who entered its gates never to emerge. What spirits linger in the dungeons below, where shadows gather thick and screams once echoed endlessly? The Tower of London was not merely a prison of high walls and locked chambers. Beneath its stones, in hidden chambers and echoing passages, darker scenes unfolded. The dungeons and torture rooms became places where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, where agony left scars not only on bodies but on the walls themselves. It is within these shadowed depths that some of the most chilling ghost stories are rooted, tales of pain that refuse to be silenced. One such place is the infamous Salt Tower. From the outside, it appears like any other part of the fortress. Thick walls, narrow windows, an unyielding presence of medieval stone. Yet within, countless prisoners scratched desperate messages into the walls, carvings of names, crosses, pleas, and symbols of faith. These markings remain, etched like open wounds in the stone, as though the very walls sought to record the torment of those confined. Some say, if you linger in silence within the Salt Tower, you can still hear whispers, prayers half-formed, groans of despair, the faint scratching of unseen hands carving into rock. Then there was the rack, a cruel invention stored within the tower's chambers, stretching prisoners until their joints tore and their screams filled the night. One of its most famous victims was Guy Fawkes, captured after the gunpowder plot of 1605. His body was shattered upon the rack, his spirit broken before execution. Some claim that in the stillness of night, the faint clank of chains and the agonized cry of a man echo through the lower chambers, as though Fawkes himself remains, endlessly stretched between life and death. Equally dreaded was the scavenger's daughter, a twisted iron frame that compressed the body instead of stretching it, crushing the victim until blood streamed from their nose and ears. Such suffering did not end with death. Those who endured such torment are said to have imprinted their agony upon the tower's air itself. Guards speak of sudden pressure in the chest when walking past certain halls, a suffocating sense of being squeezed by unseen arms. It is as though the echo of the scavenger's daughter still tightens its grip around the living. The tower's association with torture has made it fertile ground for ghostly encounters. The Cradle Tower and Bloody Tower were notorious sites where prisoners awaited their fate. Here, faint sobs are reported, drifting across the stones like echoes of despair. Some describe a figure in chains, appearing for only a moment before vanishing into the gloom. Others claim to have seen shadows writhing as if under invisible blows, replaying their torments across centuries. Among the most notorious stories is that of Sir Walter Raleigh, imprisoned multiple times in the tower during the reigns of Elizabeth I and James I. He spent years confined within its walls, sometimes permitted luxuries, other times treated with cruelty. After his execution in 1618, his restless figure has been reported pacing the battlements, his hands clasped behind his back, his face thoughtful yet troubled. Witnesses describe his form as half solid, half shadow, as though he walks in two worlds at once, one alive, one eternal. And then there is the most chilling chamber of all, the dungeons beneath the White Tower. Here, Prisoners were kept in darkness so complete that time itself dissolved. Torches flickered against damp stone, casting monstrous shadows. The screams of the tortured once rang out, echoing across the Thames. Even today, visitors describe an oppressive silence, as though sound itself is swallowed whole by the air. Some who dare to linger have reported hearing heavy footsteps behind them, only to turn and find no one there. Others feel a hand on their shoulder, cold, heavy, and distinctly human, though the chambers remain empty. The tower has long been a place where execution and imprisonment intertwined. The most prominent figures met their end not outside, but within, at Tower Green, where only the most privileged prisoners were executed in private. Here, Anne Boleyn fell. Lady Jane Grey fell. Margaret Pole fell. The green itself seems to breathe sorrow. At dusk, some say a faint mist rises from the earth, taking on shapes, women in gowns, men in armor, shadows kneeling beneath a phantom blade. Guards have admitted to hurrying past the spot at night, unwilling to look too closely. For the less fortunate, executions were carried out publicly on Tower Hill, where great crowds gathered to watch noble heads roll. The condemned marched from the tower gates to the scaffold, their footsteps echoing a final time upon the earth. Some accounts tell of spectral processions, figures in tattered finery, pale and silent, walking the same path again and again. Observers claim they vanish at the hill itself, as though swallowed by the memory of the blade. The tower is also bound by stories of phantom soldiers. This fortress was never only a prison, it was a garrison, a military stronghold. Centuries of soldiers lived and died within its walls. Some are said to still patrol their posts. At night, guards have reported hearing the stomp of boots along the battlements, accompanied by the clink of armor. Yet when they look, the walls are empty. Occasionally, a figure appears in full medieval armor, visor closed, weapon in hand. But when approached, the soldier dissolves into smoke. One of the strangest stories involves the tower's sentries themselves. Over centuries, guards assigned to patrol the tower at night have reported terrifying apparitions. Some have faced trial for abandoning their posts after encounters too dreadful to endure. One soldier in the 19th century swore he was assaulted by a tall, cloaked figure near the Traitor's Gate. He tried to thrust his bayonet into the intruder, only for the weapon to pass through as if striking mist. Moments later, he collapsed, and his comrades found him trembling and incoherent. The incident became one of many testimonies that built the tower's reputation as one of the most haunted places in England. But perhaps most terrifying of all is the sense that the tower itself is alive. The stones seem to breathe. The air grows colder with each step deeper inside. Tourists who walk the halls often remark on sudden waves of dread, unexplained chills, or the overwhelming urge to leave. Some historians argue this is the psychological weight of the tower's history pressing upon visitors. Yet those who believe in spirits suggest something else, that the suffering once contained within these walls has seeped into the structure itself, animating it with restless energy. And this raises a chilling question. If the tower itself is alive with memory, what else does it conceal in its hidden corners? Because the tower is not only home to famous royal phantoms, there are darker entities said to dwell within. Spirits without names, creatures of shadow, forms that terrify even seasoned guards. What are these figures that defy explanation? These apparitions that seem older than history itself? The Tower of London has always been more than stone and mortar. It is a vessel of memory, holding centuries of agony and ambition. But not all who linger here are human. Beyond the well-known spirits of queens and princes, there are other presences. Stranger, darker, harder to explain. Some are tied to the tower's unusual past as a menagerie, while others seem to belong to something even older, as if the fortress itself has conjured shadows to embody its bloody legacy. For over 600 years, the Tower of London housed the Royal Menagerie, a collection of exotic animals given as gifts to monarchs. Lions, leopards, elephants, monkeys, and even a polar bear once roamed within its walls. long before such creatures were known to most of England. Many lived and died in cramped cages, far from their natural homes. Their suffering, it is said, left an imprint upon the tower. One of the most famous hauntings tied to the menagerie is that of the Phantom Bear. In 1816, a sentry on duty near the Jewel House encountered what he swore was a massive bear approaching him in the darkness. Terrified, he lunged with his bayonet, but the blade passed through empty air. The soldier collapsed from shock and was found dead at his post. Since then, other guards have claimed to hear growls or feel the hot breath of an unseen beast in the shadows. Some report seeing glowing eyes in the darkness of the Byward Tower, only to vanish when approached. The Phantom Bear remains one of the tower's most chilling mysteries, an animal spirit bound to a place of human suffering. Nor is the bear the only spectral beast. Visitors have reported hearing the roar of lions long after the last lion was removed from the tower. Others speak of the slithering sound of serpents or the cries of strange birds echoing through the night. Some accounts describe shadows shaped like great cats prowling the courtyards, vanishing the moment they are seen. These ghostly echoes of the menagerie remind us that not only humans suffered within these walls, and that perhaps the dead of all kinds remain trapped in the tower's grip. Yet beyond the animals, there are other forms, darker, more elusive, harder to define. Many guards speak not of human figures but of shadows without shape, patches of darkness that move against the light. They appear in corners, along walls, even gliding across stairways. Some describe them as misty, others as solid, like figures cloaked in black. They do not always resemble people. At times, they crawl, stretch, or shift into unnatural forms. These shadowy presences are said to exude a feeling of malice. Not sorrow like Anne Boleyn, nor innocence like the lost princes, but something older, hungrier. One chilling tale tells of a guard who, while on night duty near the Wakefield Tower, saw a shadow detach itself from the wall and slide across the ground toward him. He raised his lantern, but the light seemed swallowed by the figure. It grew larger as it approached, until it towered above him. Terrified, he fled, abandoning his post. The following morning, he was court-martialed for dereliction of duty, but insisted he would rather face punishment than return to that spot alone. Other stories speak of headless figures drifting through halls without warning. Unlike Anne Boleyn, these forms are nameless, faceless, impossible to identify. One tourist claimed she saw a figure in Tudor dress glide through the Queen's house, without a head. She screamed, drawing others, but when they searched, the figure had vanished. The guide that day admitted she was not the first to report such a sight. Some encounters are subtler, yet more unsettling. Visitors walking near the bloody tower often describe a sudden feeling of suffocation, as though unseen hands are pressed against their throats. Others feel a sharp sting in their necks, as though the echo of an axe blade has just fallen. These sensations strike suddenly, without warning, and vanish as quickly as they come. Are they tricks of the mind, brought on by the tower's reputation? Or are they the remnants of execution, lingering in the air like invisible scars? Perhaps the strangest phenomena of all are the sounds that cannot be explained. Bells that ring when no rope has been pulled. Music drifting faintly from the White Tower. A mournful tune, often described as resembling a dirge, played by no known instrument. Guards speak of hearing muffled cries from the Traitor's Gate, where prisoners once entered the tower by boat. One even claimed to hear the splash of oars in the Thames, though no vessel was present. These auditory hauntings give the sense that the tower is not simply filled with ghosts, but that time itself repeats within its walls, fragments of the past replaying endlessly. And then there are the apparitions that defy all categorization, entities that seem less like spirits of the dead and more like manifestations of something deeper, darker. In the Salt Tower, several visitors have claimed to see a tall, cloaked figure with glowing red eyes, standing in silence. When approached, the figure fades into mist, leaving behind only a lingering stench of sulfur. In other accounts, People describe being overcome with sudden waves of rage or despair, emotions they cannot explain, as if something unseen has seized hold of their hearts. Folklorists argue that the tower has absorbed centuries of violence and fear, and these energies have taken on forms of their own, not ghosts of individuals, but echoes of the place itself. In this sense, the tower may be more than haunted. It may be alive. This idea is supported by one of the oldest stories tied to the fortress, the White Lady of the Tower. For centuries, visitors have reported seeing a pale woman dressed in flowing white robes drifting near the White Tower. She raises her hands in a gesture of warning, her face obscured by a veil. Witnesses describe a sudden scent of roses filling the air before she vanishes. Some believe she is the spirit of a noblewoman who died within these walls, others that she is a symbolic guardian of the tower, a figure born not from one life, but from the accumulated sorrow of many. The tower's hauntings are not confined to night. Even in daylight, visitors report strange sensations. A sudden brush of cold air across the skin, whispers in empty rooms, the distinct feeling of being watched. Guides speak of tourists fainting without explanation, collapsing in areas linked to executions or torture. When revived, many say they felt overwhelmed by a presence pressing upon them, a weight too heavy to bear. These experiences suggest that the tower's ghosts are not passive. They are active, reaching across centuries to touch the living. And with every sighting, every chill, every whisper, the question deepens. Why do they remain? Is it grief that binds them here? Rage at injustice? Or is the tower itself a prison, even for the dead? One thing is certain. Those who walk its corridors often leave with a sense that they have brushed against the unseen, that they have not simply visited a fortress, but crossed into a place where the veil between worlds is thin. And yet, the most chilling stories are still to come. For while the tower is home to royal phantoms and shadowy entities, there are darker tales still. Tales of ghostly processions, of spirits seen by kings themselves, of omens that foretold death and ruin. Could it be that the tower does not merely hold the ghosts of the past, but serves as a messenger of fate itself? The Tower of London does not only hold the restless spirits of those who died within its walls. For centuries, it has also been seen as a place of omens, a fortress that predicts the fate of kings, queens, and empires. Its ghosts are not merely echoes of the past, but messengers of the future, appearing at moments of crisis to warn of doom. Among the most famous of these omens are the ravens of the tower. Legend holds that as long as the ravens remain, the crown and the kingdom will endure. If they ever depart, England itself will fall. This belief is so strong that even today, the tower houses 7 ravens, cared for by a dedicated yeoman warder known as the Raven Master. Yet their presence is not simply symbolic. Over the years, ravens have been tied to strange occurrences. Their sudden agitation before moments of national crisis, their unexplained disappearances before the death of monarchs. Some claim the birds are not guardians but prisoners themselves, bound by the same unseen forces that hold the tower's ghosts. And when they croak in the stillness of night, it is said their cries are warnings of death to come. The tower's phantoms have often been witnessed by kings themselves, as though the fortress opens its secrets only to those who rule. During the reign of Henry VI, the king was imprisoned within the Wakefield Tower. On the eve of his murder in 1471, he was reportedly visited by a spectral figure, a monk robed in black, who stood at the foot of his bed. The next morning, Henry was found dead, stabbed to death while at prayer. For centuries after, his ghost was said to appear in the chapel where he breathed his last, particularly on the anniversary of his death. His apparition became an omen of instability, a reminder that the tower could turn even a king into a captive. Another haunting tied to the monarchy involves Queen Elizabeth III. During her imprisonment in the tower before ascending the throne, she prayed in despair within its chapel, fearing she would meet the fate of her mother, Anne Boleyn. Some accounts suggest that in those moments, she too saw a vision, not of her mother, but of a pale woman clothed in white, who raised a hand in silent warning. Elizabeth survived, but the apparition became part of the tower's lore, reinforcing the idea that its spirits do not only look backward, but reach forward, shaping destiny. The tower has also been linked to disasters beyond its walls. In the 17th century, just before the Great Fire of London, strange lights were reported within the fortress. Guards claimed to see figures carrying torches along the battlements, though no such patrols had been ordered. Days later, flames engulfed the city, reducing it to ashes. The tower survived, but the vision was remembered as a warning, a spectral rehearsal of the destruction to come. Even in modern times, the tower's omens persist. During World War II, bombs fell across London, shaking the old fortress to its foundations. On several occasions, soldiers reported seeing ghostly processions within the grounds, lines of pale figures in chains, walking silently toward Traitor's Gate. Some believed these were the souls of prisoners reenacting their final journeys. Others whispered that the tower itself was reminding the living of the cost of war. Perhaps the most enduring story of all is that of the ghostly bear of 1816, not only as a haunting, but as a harbinger of death. The soldier who encountered it died within hours of the vision. Since then, the appearance of phantom animals within the tower has often been followed by tragedy: the death of a monarch, the outbreak of conflict, the fall of a dynasty. It is as if the spirits of beasts once caged here have become guardians of prophecy, warning of upheaval through their terrifying forms. The tower's role as a place of execution deepens its reputation as a cursed site. Every drop of blood spilled on Tower Green, every scream that echoed in its dungeons has soaked into its foundations. The fortress does not release what it consumes. Some say this is why the ghosts remain, not simply because of violent death, but because the tower itself feeds on suffering, binding souls to its stones. The yeoman warders, who live within the tower even today, know these stories well. Many have admitted quietly that they too have experienced the strange and the unexplainable. Some wake at night to hear footsteps in empty corridors. Others refuse to enter certain towers after dark. A few have spoken of sudden visions, a woman in Tudor dress standing at the foot of their bed, or the sound of children laughing in rooms where no one lives. These accounts are passed quietly among the warders, part of a living tradition of fear and respect for the tower's unseen inhabitants. And for those who doubt, the tower has one last lesson. Its stories endure not only because of fear, but because they are inseparable from history itself. To speak of Anne Boleyn's execution is to speak of her ghost. To recall the prince's disappearance is to recall their pale forms drifting through the bloody tower. The past and the supernatural are fused here, impossible to separate. The Tower of London is more than a fortress, more than a prison, more than a palace. It is a monument to power built upon human suffering. Its stones are heavy with centuries of betrayal, cruelty, and despair. And such weight cannot be lifted easily. It clings, binding the living to the dead, forcing each new generation to confront the specters of those who came before. So when tourists walk its halls, when they pause to take a photograph, when they smile at the ravens or marvel at the crown jewels, they are standing not only in a place of history, but in a place of haunting. The footsteps they hear may not be their own. The chill they feel may not be from the wind. The shadows that drift at the edges of vision may not belong to this world. For the Tower of London is not merely haunted by ghosts. It is haunted by England itself, its betrayals, its violence, its ambitions, its endless hunger for power. And as long as the tower stands, so too will its phantoms, waiting for the living to remember. And perhaps, one night, when the ravens take flight, when the gates creak open of their own accord, when the shadows gather thicker than ever before, the tower will remind us that its story is not finished. For the dead of the tower never sleep.